Hogwarts Castle, a 5-inch gauge locomotive, part 17, fitting the brake blocks to the brake hangers. You've seen the brake hangers, and here are the brake shoes. I made these a while back, and so I didn't lose them. I tied them together with a piece of silver solder, which can now go back into the outer part of the workshop where I do my silver soldering. What I propose to do is fit the brake shoes to the brake hangers and then fit them to the brackets on the engine. Before I start, I have to mention that the brakes on this engine are going to be non-functional, because any braking system on the 6 driving wheels of the locomotive would be ineffective. The only practical use for a braking system on the locomotive is to make sure it doesn't roll off the steaming bay. The tender for this engine already has a fully working braking system, which is sufficient to stop the engine from rolling off the steaming bay if it was set in forward gear and had a leaky regulator. The braking system that I'm going to fit to the locomotive chassis is not going to be functional, but it will look like the way it should do. I studied quite a lot of photographs of Great Western Railway brakes, and the design is quite different to the braking systems of other railway companies at the time. I'm going to thread all of the brake hangers using a 7BA tap, and I'm also threading the bracket that is silver soldered to the brake shoe, and once the bolt is all the way through the assembly, I'm putting a lock nut on the back. Well, I would be if I could find a spanner the right size. No, that one's no good. What about this one? No, that one's no good either. Over a year of model engineering, at the level that I do it, which is fairly frequently, I would probably waste about 3 months looking for spanners. And that's one of the reasons I use this, a Barco adjustable spanner. This very high quality spanner that I've had for now 35 years or more never rounds the edges of nuts and bolts because it is a precision item. With the lock nut in place, the brake hanger and the brake block is now ready to fit to the chassis. This is a 5BA bolt with a brass washer, and this is how I'm going to hold the hanger to the main bracket. If these were going to be working brakes, I would not do it this way. I would make a pin with one end threaded to screw into the square part of the bracket. But as I've already mentioned, these brakes are going to be non-working, so it will be perfectly fine doing it this way, just using a normal bolt. Here I am using the tap to thread the second brake hanger, pretty much in the same way that I threaded the first one, and very similar to the way I'm going to thread the other 4, but I'm not going to show the threading of every one of the brake hangers. A word of warning when threading small pieces of metal with small taps. They can quite easily break, so take it easy, be gentle and occasionally back off to clear the swarf. And very important, do not drop the entire assembly, the tap wrench, the tap, and the part that you're tapping, on the floor during the tapping process, because usually the tap will break off in the work. I speak from experience. As before, I'm using my Barco spanner to tighten the lock nut in place, and once again I'm using a 5BA bolt with a brass washer to hold the hanger in place into the bracket. The sequence of events for fitting the brake hangers is a little bit back to front. Once all of these brake hangers are fitted into the brackets, I will measure the distance between the holes in the bottom part of the hanger, because I need to make some special pieces of flat bar that engage the holes in the hanger, and these parts would normally be used to apply the brakes, but in this case, as the brakes are all going to be dummy, the cross pieces will hold the brakes in a position so they don't rub on the wheels. More about that later in another episode. Here's a close-up of the tapping process. First I tap the hanger, and after that I tap the bracket in the brake shoe. Then, as you've already seen, I bolt them together. I think it's time for a top tip. I spend a lot of time doing this, sorting through small pots of nuts and bolts, and in this instance I'm looking for brass washers, and there they are clearly in the right hand side of the picture. It's really quite difficult to get parts out of these small drawers. That sounds like a girlfriend joke. I think I'll rephrase it. It's quite difficult to get parts out of these small plastic drawers. And here's a tip: to extract washers and other small parts from confined spaces, just wet your finger. Saliva usually does the trick, and it's also quite good for picking washers up from flat surfaces. Now I have a selection of brass washers, I can get on with the job, and once again I'm fastening the hanger into the bracket using a 5BA bolt and one of the aforementioned brass washers. It's 3 down and 3 to go on the other side. But to save time in the video, as it's very much a repeat process, I'm only showing the fitting of these to one side, although in the next image you'll see them fitted to both sides. Some of these hangers were tight and some were slack, but that's just the way it is, and as the dummies anyway, it doesn't matter. What I'm doing in this clip is measuring the distance between the hangers at each side of the frames, because even though the braking system isn't actually going to physically work, it still needs to look the part. Here's a wider shot showing the general arrangement. One hanger per wheel, one brake block per wheel. All I need to do now is make the linkages. But that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful.